We are introduced to a young boy named Craig who's dealing with some hard times after he lost his mother early on in life, trying to figure out how to go about things. He's in church with his father one day, notices that a local billionaire, Mr. Harrigan, has walked in and took notice of the boy. Mr. Harrigan seems to show some interest in having someone read to him, someone who can read books to him since he's lost a lot of his vision in the recent years. He ends up contacting Craig and his father about the position, and Craig shows up to his mansion one day to start the job. He starts meeting all of the people that work at the mansion, and then Mr. Harrigan in this room greets him, and he begins reading to him. And this is a process that starts out a bit awkward for both of them, but they quickly become friends over the next couple years as he reads these books to Mr. Harrigan and talks to him about life. One year for Christmas, Mr. Harrigan buys Craig a lottery ticket as a present. He scratches it off and discovers that he's won a good sum of money. Not a ton of money, but a few $1,000s. He tells Mr. Harrigan on the phone with an iPhone that he's just purchased. He's very excited. Mr. Harrigan warns him that those things have a lot of frequencies that can be bad for you, and he doesn't seem to trust the phones. Mr. Harrigan asks him why he's stuck with him for all these years, why he hasn't left as he's changed, why he still shows up 3 days a week. Craig just says that he enjoys their time together. He presents Mr. Harrigan with an iPhone. Mr. Harrigan seems skeptical at first, doesn't believe that he's ever going to have any kind of use for it, and that he should give it away to his father. But Harrigan does take it, and Craig starts to show him some of the use cases for the phone, such as looking up financials and other news informations that won't even be in the newspapers for a day at least. Mr. Harrigan quickly becomes a bit obsessed with the phone, the device. He starts using it every day. He doesn't care so much about being read to or anything else, but he also predicts that these phones are going to have some negative consequences with people becoming hooked on them and what kind of information they will spread over time. Craig starts to realize that Harrigan just wants to spend time on his phone. He sure loves the device. He doesn't want to break away from it, and he's not valuing their time reading books anymore. Craig shows up one day as normal to read to Mr. Harrigan, finds him unresponsive, immediately dials 911 and believes that something is seriously wrong. He sees a call coming in from Pirate King, the name that Mr. Harrigan had him put into his contacts. It's as if he was calling him from the dead. But how could that be possible? He's not sure. It's a bit creepy, but he takes the phone. He puts it in his pocket, and he stays with Mr. Harrigan until EMTs show up, as he cannot be revived. Craig and his father attend Mr. Harrigan's funeral. It's a sad event, and many of the housekeepers show up as well. They all seem to like Mr. Harrigan to some extent, although he was a bit antisocial. After the funeral, an attorney shows up and asks Craig to meet up with him and says that he has some unfinished business with Mr. Harrigan. He presents him with a piece of paper and tells him that there is possibly some inheritance coming from Mr. Harrigan. His father seems skeptical at first, worrying what this might be about. He then finds out that Mr. Harrigan had left him $800,000 in a trust fund in order for him to go to college and pursue his dreams. Craig is a bit creeped out when he discovers that he has a message back from Mr. Harrigan in the note that seems to correspond to a text that he had sent him, saying, "Wish you were here." It's a little bit creepy, but he doesn't think too much about it immediately. Craig decides to show his father a strange message that comes in from Mr. Harrigan's number. It doesn't seem to make any sense initially, but he'll ponder on it for some time before discovering what really is going on. He actually visits the gravesite of Mr. Harrigan and tries to call the phone. He bends down to the ground, and he hears the ringtone Mr. Harrigan had set on his phone. It creeps him out a bit. One day, Craig is going to school, and he witnesses one of the bullies seemingly making some kind of transaction. The bully witnesses him doing that, and that'll come back into play. They're getting ready for the school dance, and Craig is feeling pretty good about life. He's kind of moved on a little bit, and he's kind of hoping that this girl will ask him that he has a crush on, and she does. He seems pretty happy. He says he'll go. They decide to head to the dance together, and it's going to be what would hopefully be a perfect night. Attending the ball, the snowball. The perfect night won't last forever. Shortly after, Craig is confronted by the bully who witnessed him doing the transaction. The bully takes him outside, and assumes that Craig is the one who ratted him out, got him suspended from school. He confronts him, and it quickly devolves into violence. Craig takes a swing at him, but the bully's much stronger and beats him senseless. It's hard to watch. Later on, Craig is at home. He's beat up. He decides to call Mr. Harrigan's phone to vent, saying he doesn't think that the bullying is going to stop. He thinks it's going to get worse, that he wishes that Mr. Harrigan was there to give him some kind of advice, some way to help him in some way. Craig wakes up the next day and finds out some horrific news. He finds out that the bully is dead, that he's passed on. Him and his friends decide to drive by the bully's home, get a closer look, and try to figure out what actually happened. They see him being carted away. Apparently it fell trying to sneak out. They stare on, and then they see the family of the bully and realize they are broken, and that this bully, despite what he had done to Craig, still had a family and people that had cared about him severely. Craig believes that maybe Mr. Harrigan had something to do with this. So he goes home that night, and he gets a new message from Mr. Harrigan's phone. It still doesn't quite make sense, just a string of letters. He stares at them. He's now convinced that somehow Mr. Harrigan is communicating with him from the grave, that Mr. Harrigan had heard his request to help him with the bully, and that Mr. Harrigan did something to the bully, may have ended his life. So Craig goes to the phone store the next day, and he asks him about these weird messages, and the guy tries to explain to him that there were some early bugs with the first generation of iPhones, and sometimes messages would send to the wrong receivers or something strange like that, and it's nothing to be concerned about. And he asks him about getting a new phone and upgrading. So Craig gets a new phone, he sets it up, and he attempts to reach out to the Pirate King, Mr. Harrigan. And he is very relieved to find out that when he tries to contact him, the number doesn't come up, it's out of service. He believes that maybe he can move on, and that this time and this haunting connection that he has with Mr. Harrigan from beyond the grave may now be over. So he heads home, and he puts the old iPhone back into storage. He hides it, he puts it away. Then he says goodbye to his father after he's graduated high school, and he heads off to college. He briefly sees what looks like his mother. He starts out in the dorms. He's having a good time. He's moving on with his life. He's getting his adult life figured out when he receives horrific news that one of his previous teachers, Miss Hart, someone who had helped him deal with the bully, was in a horrific accident. There was a drunk driver, Dean Whitmore, that was driving and drinking and not paying attention very closely to the road. And Miss Hart and her fiance were driving as well on a little getaway when they had a fatal encounter with the drunk driver, ending their lives. However, the driver, Dean Whitmore, is fine. They attend the funeral and then wonder if Dean Whitmore will be sentenced, if he'll get away with the accident that he caused. Craig doesn't initially believe so, but then in court, they find out that Dean Whitmore is going to get slapped with pretty much nothing, and he will face 6 months in rehab. They believe that this is an injustice and not fair. Craig, while still home, digs the old phone out of his closet, searching for it. In a fit of anger and a fit of rage about what's happening, he decides that he's going to try once again to reach out to Mr. Harrigan, to tell him what happened, to tell him about this man who did this horrific thing and does not face any kind of justice. Craig makes the rash decision to tell all of this, and then he watches over the next couple days. He searches for information on this man, Dean Whitmore, and then one day he finds out Dean Whitmore had a fatal accident. But it wasn't an accident, it was seemingly self-inflicted. He determines that this had to have been from Mr. Harrigan after talking about the details with people that were at the rehab center. He goes to Mr. Harrigan's mansion, and the groundskeepers let him in and ask him if he wants to look at things. And he goes and opens up a closet that was previously not available to him because Mr. Harrigan believed it had secrets. He finds out that this was a shrine that Mr. Harrigan had made to his mother, who he lost early on in life, just like Craig as well. He gets another strange message from the phone of Mr. Harrigan. He visits Harrigan's grave, and it's there that he comes to the revelation that these messages are likely a request from Mr. Harrigan to let him move on, to quit asking for his help, to let go, to move on in life. Craig then visits the nearby grave of his mother, and he breaks down, not sure what to do, not sure how to move on. He is a very broken person at this point in time, He has lost so much, and he believes he has some responsibility for the horrific accidents that have occurred with his communication. He heads back to the reserve, and he's contemplating throwing himself away, ending himself. But at the last moment before doing so, he takes the old phone, he pulls it out of his pocket, and he makes the decision to move on, to let go. He throws it into the water, ending his communication with Mr. Harrigan. And at this point, he comes to a revelation that phones can be bad for us in some ways, that our addiction to them can be bad for us in these ways, and that when he passes away, he wants to be buried with no phones, with his pockets empty. Mr. Harrigan's phone is a creepy tale indeed. I hope you enjoyed it.